Hello everyone, welcome to another wire wrap tutorial video. My name is Jim McIntosh and today we're going to be making a pendant. Now if you've been kind of watching some of the pendants I've been making here over about the last year, a lot of them have been prong set pendants. And prong setting is a nice way to really highlight the stone. And today we're going to be making kind of a hybrid. It's going to have prongs on it, but it's also going to have a nice swirl that comes across the front of it. And that swirl, those wires that come across the front, those are going to be used to hold the whole piece in. And it's a real fun project. It's kind of an involved project. So take your time with this. You may have to stop the video and kind of rewind a little bit just to double check to see how it was done. But with a little patience and some time, this is going to be a great project for you. And I really enjoyed making it because it really gives a beautiful look to the stone and really highlights that stone as well. So I'm glad you're here. Why don't we now just hop on over to the bench and we'll take a look at what we're going to be doing, all right? Okay, so let's take a look at the project that we're going to be working on here. Now this is, if you flip it over, you'll notice that this is just like a lot of the other prong set pieces I've done. It's a centralized setting, so all of the wraps are hidden behind the stone. They're centralized here. Everything fits in this section here, and then the setting is brought across the front of the stone. I've used a bail that I'm going to just attach just a cord to this part. A nice piece of turquoise that I'm using here. It's a 40 by 30 millimeter, and we're using some sterling silver, but it's a real nice setting. You'll notice that the setting, it's got a 4-point basically prongs to a degree. It's just that these prongs here aren't really prongs, but they act as prongs because they're covering the top and the bottom of the piece in 4 points across the stone. And it also adds a nice, this moon shape swirl across the front. So this is what we're going to be taking a look at doing here today. It's not as hard as you think. You just take your time and this is going to work out just fine. Let's continue on to the next part. So before we begin, let's take a look at all of the tools we're going to be using for this. Now, first of all, we're going to need a pair of wire cutters. That's to get the wire off of the spool and to be able to do some trimming with it. We're going to use these WrapMaker pliers, and these are great for making those wraps. These really help a lot. So if you don't have a pair of these, head on over to my website. All of the information is down in the description. Pick up a pair of these because they make wrapping and starting wraps so much easier. So we'll be using these, and these also work as flat nose pliers as well, and that's how we'll be using these quite a bit. We're going to use a flat hand file. Now this is my long one. Let me show you the short one I'm going to be using. Here's my short one, and I have a flat hand file that's got a cutting edge on all 4 surfaces. So it's square, so it's got some cutting surface. We're going to be using this narrow side of it. We'll also use a rawhide mallet, and with that we will be using it with our bench block as well. We'll also need our Dremel tool or some sort of a flex shaft of some sort, and I've got in here a silicone rubber polishing wheel. And again, these you can find a link to where to get these down in the description as well. We're going to use this to do some shaping of the metal just to make it smooth and easier to work with. We'll need to be making some loops. So to make those loops, we'll need something round. Now I'm going to be using my steel ring mandrel. If you don't have a steel ring mandrel, you've got a wooden one perhaps, use it. A dowel rod will work. A small tomato paste can, those will also work. You just need something so you can make this round shape, because if you make a big one, you can always make that loop smaller by pinching it together. So we just need something to be able to make those loops. And of course, where would I be without my painter's tape? I always use it with a pair of scissors, so I cut off pieces of this. This is great for holding the wire bundles together, keeping things nice and neat so that we can work that much easier. I'm all about working easy, not hard. We'll also need something to measure with. I've got my old measuring tape here. I've been using this for years. This is my favorite one. And I also have a flat ruler here as well. It's got millimeters on one side, inches on the other, and we'll be using that for some of our finer measurements as well. So that should be just about everything we need for this project. Let's now move on and we'll take a look at the materials. For the materials, let's get all this stuff out of my way here. For my materials, I'm going to be using, this is a large cabochon. It's a 30 by 40 millimeter cabochon. This is a great project for this larger cabochons because it gives you all of this space here to put that wire across it. So that's why I'm using a large one. And you can use any shaped one, but I prefer these larger ones for this project. And for the materials, we're going to be using 18 gauge sterling silver half round. So use any type of metal you'd like, as long as it's 18 gauge half round. And we're also going to be using 18 gauge square sterling silver wire. And again, you can use any metal you want, as long as it's 18 gauge and it's square. And this is dead soft. You know that I always use dead soft in my work because you can harden the metal as you're going, and it's easier to work with. This dead soft is. So these are just some of the things we're going to need for this project. So if you're ready, let's jump right into it. So we begin this by cutting our wire. And I'm going to cut for the bail wire, the center wire, is going to be an 8-inch piece of sterling. So that's 8 inches. For the side piece, the decorative piece that goes on the side of it, we're going to cut 2 of these at 6 inches. So here's our first one at 6, and let's cut a second one now at 6. Here we go. And then for the prong wire, for this size stone, we're going to just need a 3-inch piece of wire. So we'll cut that as well. And once you get all these cut, just take a few minutes and straighten your wires out so that they're easier to work with. So to start the project, now that we've got everything cut and ready, we're going to start with these 2 6-inch pieces of wire. Now, this might be a little more wire than you're going to need for this project, but I prefer to have more wire than less in these particular projects because it just makes it easier to work with, and you'll understand that a lot better here as we go. So we're going to start by making each of these into kind of a lollipop shape. So find the approximate middle, and I'm putting this on the edge of the end of my ring mandrel. This is the large end, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each side of this and I'm going to bring it around the mandrel. This is going to be the large hoop or circle that we're going to make. So to understand how big we're going to need, we can kind of do a little bit, but what we want is we want this loop to cover from the bottom part of the stone to the top part of the stone. Because if we put prongs here, normally the prongs would go here at the top and 2 at the bottom, and we want this to kind of take the place of those prongs, and we want it to kind of come across the front of the stone. So that looks like it's probably going to be about the size I need. So now that I've got these crossed over one another, we need to take our pliers. I'm using my WrapMaker pliers here. They also double as flat nose pliers. And I'm going to find the approximate center, and I'm going to just undo these 2 sides, and I'm turning this into what I call a lollipop. And this will make sense once I hold it out. See, so kind of when we hold the bottom together, it kind of looks like a lollipop. Okay, and double check to make sure so we're still good with the size on here. And you know what, this may be, so let me explain how I want this to cover a little bit better. I want it to cover the stone to put that design on there, but we're also going to remember we're going to be bending this around from the back, so I'm going to want approximately 5 millimeters of this, so where the two pieces of this loop come together, I want it to be about 5 millimeters. Right now it's about 10, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make an adjustment here. I'm going to bring where these come together, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so that I may have to do both sides. Yeah, let me get both sides here. And what we're doing is we're just kind of bringing this loop in just a little bit so that so now it's covering about almost 3/4 of the stone, and we brought it in a little bit. So that's good. So we'll set this one aside. Now we're going to make the inner circle, or the inner loop that's on here. Let me do one thing here before. I'm going to give a nice crisp bend. And now I want you to notice that I am leaving this wide open, and the reason for that is because the loop that we're going to be making here in just a second is going to fit in between here, and we're going to wrap these together. So I'm going to now make a smaller loop with this other piece of 6-inch, and I'm actually going to go a little bit further down the ring mandrel, and I mean, we can always adjust this, but I'm going to go down to about a size 9 on here, and I'm going to find the center of this, and I'm going to bring both ends around the ring mandrel, and I'm looking to make sure that they're both about even. So both sides it looks about even. So here is our smaller loop, and like I said, that's going to fit inside of here, and this might be too much of a loop. Let me kind of make this just slightly smaller, and all I'm going to do to make that smaller is I'm just going to pinch it together to kind of, that's about what I want. So now that we've got that, we can take these two ends and we can straighten them out, and we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to take the two ends where they crossed over one another, and we're going to straighten them out. And now we've got a second lollipop that we can put inside this first one. Where they all come together, and then we're going to connect it together with a piece of painter's tape, and that will hold them all together. So let me grab my painter's tape, and we'll do that right now. So let's make sure we've got these inside one another, and we're going to bring them all together, and then I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape, and I'm going to bring them all together and hold them in with that tape so that we can add a wrap wire to this. Alright, so there, we've got it all together. So here towards the end, I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape, I'm going to put it across all the wires securely, and then I'm going to make this little flag. I just taped it to itself. So now you can make some adjustments here. Make sure you've got stuff centered. Looks like we've got it all set. Bring them all together better. And we can fix this also as we're wrapping. When we wrap these, it's going to join them together. Now you've got them all set up, so now you can take a look. That's what we're looking for right here. This is what we're going to end up with, is these wires across the front. So let's take our wrap wire, take a piece, about a 6-inch piece of half-round wire, and we're going to grab our WrapMaker pliers and hold these here at the end. See, so notice what the WrapMaker pliers do. We've got a piece of tape here holding these together. That's so we can work with it. But the tip here, this long tip, is going to hold these wires flat, and that helps us to be able to, so that the wires don't bunch together. So here's our wrap wire, and we're going to insert it here between the jaws and little space there. And we're going to I'm going to make about 3 wraps. So 1, here's 2, 1 more. There, that's 3 wraps, and we're going to push this up to the top of these, or at the bottom of the loop, should I say. And then we can make them flattened out. So once we flatten them, that's going to set this in place. And the other thing I like to do is on some of these wraps, especially a wrap that's going to be needing to secure things together really well, I like to kind of take and put it on here. I put the cut end down. Put the cut end down, and I'll give it a couple of good hits just to make sure that it's all in here centered correctly, but this is going to be a strong setting. So I use my rawhide mallet for that. Now we can go ahead and we can trim. Let's now turn our attention to the bale wire. Now you remember that's the long wire we cut, the 8-inch wire of 18 gauge square wire that we're using, and we're going to make another loop just like we already made, but we're going to again make this, let's go down here to about a size 9 again. That's a nice size, and I'm going to bring the two ends around. I'm going to make that lollipop shape that we already made, and I just want to kind of center this here so that both sides are about equal. They look like they're about equal. And I want to make sure that this is the right size, so we're going to put this behind here and look at it as the bale. And that looks like it's about right. It's about how wide I'd like it. So now that we know, now if I wanted to, again, if I wanted to make this a smaller or larger, all I'm going to do is make that adjustment right here by pulling them in or bringing them out wider. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that. Now we're going to take our WrapMaker pliers and we're going to straighten these two out and make that lollipop shape. And there we go. So that's going to be our bale. Now this is going to be one of those bales where you're going to use a piece of cord to put in here. We're not going to put another piece in here. Now what you could do is you could actually take a jump ring and loop a jump ring in here and make the bale. Let me show you that. Let me see, I think I've got one. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let me show you what I mean by you can add a jump ring to it. Here's a closed jump ring that I have, and I could use this as the bale. All I would do right now is feed it in here, see, and that would make a nice bale on here. You can shape this. A lot of times I like to make it oblong so that it hangs better, but I'm not going to do this on this particular one. I'm going to actually make it very similar to that 3-in-1 pendant that I've made, where we can add a wire at the top. So maybe you'll recall, I'll leave a link here, put the cards up there, but very similar to this one where I just made this eye so that we could put another part of this together. So that's kind of the similar way I'm going to do this. Okay, so that's what we have. So now I want to do some measurements here because I want to center this on the piece. So I'm going to set it down and I'm going to put my stone on here approximately where I want it to sit on the piece. So that's going to be right about in here. I want a little bit of space here. So I'm going to take a fine tip permanent marker and I'm just going to mark the top where the wire comes out from the piece, and then I'm also going to measure the bottom right there. That's going to help me in measuring and setting up the wrap that we're going to be making. So let me fix this just a little bit. There we go. So we've got 3 marks on here. This is the top and here is the bottom on here. So to figure out where we're going to do the cut and wrap area, we want to center it. That's why we made this bottom. So we've got a 40mm stone. The length of this stone is 40 millimeters. So we want to find the center of the stone as if it were on here. So we're going to put the 0 on our scale here on that bottom piece, and then we're going to find the center. So we said it was a 40mm stone, so the center of this would be at 20 millimeters. So that's the center of the cabochon. So from that, we can now make our other measurements. Now we're going to do a cut and wrap area that is a 1/2 inch long. So I've centered a 1/4 inch here on that center mark we just made. Now I'm going to do a 0 mark here, and then up here at the top, a 1/4 inch. So now notice it's right at the bottom of our loop is where that 1/4 inch mark, and that's typical for the way I set these up. I seem to just like a little bit of that stone, a little bit of the metal sticking out from the top of the stone. So this kind of sets that up. Now the next thing we need to do in order to make our cut and wrap area is now to take the 3-inch piece of wire, and we're going to find the center of that as well. So it's 3 inches, so the center would be at 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make a mark there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this is the prong wire, remember the 3-inch wire, and I'm going to line that up with that center mark, the center of the cabochon. And I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape now, and I'm going to put it here at the bottom, just outside of the area that we're going to be cutting. And we're also going to then put a piece of tape here at the top. Now, this one's going to be a little weird because we're going to have to figure out how to hold it all together with inside of the loop. So I just kind of put it across the top, and I bring it around the back and tape it to itself on each side. See, so now I've got the wrap area is from here to here. And I'm going to take actually another piece of tape, and I'm going to put it just outside of that bottom wrap area. The bottom of the wrap area right here. So this is the area we're going to concentrate on, is this center section. And we're going to do that by using a file, flat file. This is a hand file. It's a larger file. The files that I use have cutting edges on all 4 sides of it. We're going to be using the edge of this, the side of it. And I normally do this flat on my bench, but in order to record everything, I use this little sanding block that I do. Now I'm going to take my flat file on its edge, and I'm going to start at this bottom marked area that we've got here. I'm going to cut or file just about maybe a 1/2 millimeter area deep. That's about how deep we're in. This is much larger than a 1/2 millimeter, but we only want to cut away enough of the material to hold the wrap wire in. So I start here, and I just take my time, and I cut into it. And then when I get a couple of passes, I put it on its pointed edge, and I will do a pass or two there with that, just to define a shoulder on there. And I'll do the same thing when I get to the other side. So I'll just keep filing till I get to the other side of this. You just want to take your time with this. Now I have a bad habit of putting my thumb against this area. I've done that for years, and I just find it makes it easier to guide this, but I also end up with a filed spot on my thumb. So don't do that. Don't do as I do, unless of course you want to cut part of your thumb away. But I'm going to do an edge here, a couple of passes. There we go. And then I just want to make sure that I've got it nice and cleaned all the way across. So you can see we've got that nice area there that we've done. And I flip it around, and I will do a couple of passes just to make sure I get that flat on both sides. I'm not taking a lot of material off. Okay. So that will give us an area on here that we can cut and wrap. The whole idea is that the wrap wire will sit inside of this very shallow channel that we've made. So the next thing we need to do is we need to join these 2 sections together. We need to do that right now. But in order to understand where everything goes, the one thing I found helpful is I like to put that center mark back in. So I'm going to set this back down, and I've got my 0 here, and I'm going to just make a mark at that 1/4 inch. That tells me where the center of this is, because what I want to do, I'm going to take this tape off here in a second, but what I want to do is I want to line up the center of this right there with the center of the cabochon. That way I know that I've got everything centered properly. So that's what I've got set up. So let's take this tape off. We're going to take not all of it. We're just going to take these bottom pieces off so that it gives us an area to be able to add this, because we're going to tape it all back together here in a second. That's what we're going to do. So there's our center mark that we just made, and now I'm going to line this up where they split right here. I'm going to line that up with that center mark. Now notice here on the wrap, this is the cut sides. This is going to be up against the stone. That's what I want. I want this to be against the stone. So we've got this. There we go. Now I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to tape the bottom of this and incorporating now this second loop that we've added. So there's one, and I'm going to put another one just slightly higher than that, just so that we can have a nice secured wrap, or a setting to wrap. Okay, and I'm going to put one up here as well to kind of tape all of this together. And all of this tape is going to come off. That's the beauty of painter's tape, is painter's tape will come off without leaving a residue. So now what we need to do is we need to wrap this center section. Now you'll notice that your wires are not flat with one another, and so I like to, before I do this wrap, is I like to kind of flatten this, because what it's doing is it's coming up over the top of this loop. So I like to kind of squeeze it to make the area that I'm going to be wrapping flat with this center section. So let's get some wrap wire. And again, we're going to use I'd say about a 6-inch piece of wrap wire. Let me cut one off. It's 6, maybe a little bit more. And we're going to position our WrapMaker pliers here, where we're going to start the wrap. Now this is the good thing about these pliers, is to get this wrap, we're going to have to kind of maneuver our way around some of these things, and that's going to be kind of a cumbersome, but there we go. So now we're going to insert the wrap wire in between that opening there. Oops. Put it in there so it bottoms out. And then we're going to start our wrap. So we're going to go around that loop just gently, and we're going to make one wrap, wrapping that whole section together. And you want a good tight wrap. So as you're coming down here, as you're down here with it, pull slightly and then bring it up. It'll lock that into place, and then you can move it to where you want it. Well, let's do a second one and then we'll move it, because it'll give it some more, a little more area. There we go. So we've got 2 wraps on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pliers off, and I'm going to just inch this up to the top of the channel that we've made here. Okay. May have to, there we go. Okay, now set those in place, and then I'm going to do one more wrap here. There. Now we are at this center section. We need to bridge the gap to go past this wrap here, so this wrap that's on these loops. So now that we're here at the center, we're going to go across the gap, and then we will make another wrap here on the other side. So take a look at that. So this is the inside. This is going to be up against the stone. Let me show you what people will see. They will see this. They will see the gap, but they won't see that we've spanned that gap. So we're going to make a couple more wraps on this side. And we're going to continue setting things in place, making sure that the wrap is even. There we go. And we got one more to do. There we go. And I made this a really tight wrap. And then I'm going to set everything in place with these by squeezing it. And then we can cut off the excess wrap wire. And remember, I always cut my wrap wire half the width of the bundle. See, so it's pretty close to the center of the bundle. Do the same thing on this side. We will trim, and then we will push this down so that it's laying flat against everything. There we go. See, so now we've got this done, we can take all of this tape off because it's doing us no good now that we've got this wrapped. Now these top ones are going to be a little tricky to kind of get your hands around because we've got them on here kind of weird, but they come off. Here we go. One side, and let's get our pliers in here. There we go. All right. Things were not cooperating. There we go. All right, so we've got all of our tape off. Let's see what we've done. So if we take our stone and we set our stone here at those marks that we made, so you'll notice everything should be pretty centered. Very good. So what we want to do now is we want to take our prong wire and move it out to where it's going to go. So I'm going to do a 45-degree-ish angle on this wire. That was the 3-inch wire. Now what are we going to do with these? Well, these we're going to bring around to the back. These are the ends of these two loops here. We're going to bring them around our loop, our bail loop, to the back of the piece, and we're going to bend them down over the wrap and then trim them off. So I'm here at the back of the piece, and all I've done is I've bent it down over here, and now I'm going to trim those short. There. And we will push these down. Whoops. Push these down as best we can over the wrap. We're going to use that polishing wheel that I showed you with on the Dremel. We're going to use that to clean all of these up, so they won't even be felt by the wearer because they'll be nice and smooth. Okay, so we've got those there, and then we've got all of our wires here at the bottom that we're not going to be using. So we're going to take all of those, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to bring all 4 of them up over that bottom wrap. And then we'll trim them, and we'll push those up against the back of this. If I can get my pliers, there we go. Okay. Set that aside, and let's finish pushing these down onto the wrap. There. And there. And that's just another way of also locking everything in place so that it does not move out of our way. So let me show you what we're going to, well, actually let me show you now what everything should look like. So now you've got your prongs here. Let me set it down. So now you've got your prongs here on the one side that we're going to be bringing onto the stone, and then you've got your decorative loop slash setting on this side as well. So now let's clean up these back pieces, and then we'll move on to setting the stone in place. All right, let's do that right now. All right, so before we can make the setting for this, we need to kind of clean up this back area a bit, those wires that we bent over the wraps. And we're going to do that with a rotary tool. I'm using my Dremel. And inserted, I have a silicone rubber polishing wheel. And you can find these, I got a link down in the description where you can find these, but I'm just going to trim these up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take that edge off of there. We're going to kind of knock these down a little bit just so that they sit nice and flat. Okay, this takes me a few minutes, so you're not going to watch all of it, but I'm going to show you what we're looking at. All right, so now let's go ahead and we'll knock some of this off here. Alright, so what we've done is we've just kind of taken some of this off so that it doesn't sit as high, and I just kind of flattened it out a little bit, took off some of the rough edges just so that it, when it's up against somebody's skin, they won't feel these rough edges. So that's all we want to do with these, is just kind of take some of this rough side off. So it looks pretty good. So what we want to do now is we want to concentrate on our prongs. So now we've got the back all cleaned up and we've got everything set where we want it. We can now pay attention to the setting. And what we want to do is I want you to set the stone on your work surface in front of you. And I want you to take the setting and I want you to center it on the stone. And you want... what you want is you want this centered right down the center line this way as well as this way. So just make just some slight adjustments. This is kind of tricky because the stone's moving and you're moving and all this other great stuff. Then I want you to take a piece of tape when you get it set where you want it. Now notice kind of in the center. Here we go. So now that you've got it centered, take a piece of painter's tape and I just want you to stick it right to the stone so that it holds it there in place. We're going to flip it over and take a look and see, yeah, look how close to the marks I got it. I actually got it pretty close and I'm pretty happy with that. So we're going to kind of secure this down. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our fine tip permanent marker and we're going to mark the prong wires where they come out of the stone. Where they come away from the stone. And that's going to be where we're going to bend these prongs at. So now once you've got that set, you can remove that piece of tape and remove the setting from there. And you'll notice that I made two marks here on the prong wires. And I'm going to take my WrapMaker pliers and I'm just going to put them just outside of that mark I made, and I'm going to bend it toward me. So now remember, this is the cut side of the stone. It's going to be up against, or the cut side of the wrap rather, it's going to be up against the stone. So I'm bringing this over the top of the stone. So I'll do the same thing over here. I'm on the outside and I'm just going to do that. That is going to tell me now where it's bent at. So the next thing we can do is we can put the stone in, and this area here, you can now bend both of these up and over the stone. And don't worry, we're going to be fixing some of this here in a second. And then you can take the prongs and you can push them over the stone, so it should hold it in pretty well. Now these are not, you'll notice they're not down all the way. We're going to fix that in just a second, but what we want to do is we want to cut the prongs, and I like to cut the prongs just where they come just as it goes flat. That's where I like to cut them. So I try to kind of get them even. Just take wire cutters and give them a cut. And do the same thing over here. We're just going to kind of cut these, and we can trim it. It's better to cut them long than to cut them too short, because you can always fix that. So I've got them pretty close to where I want them. So now I'm going to open them back up so I can take the stone out, and we're going to work on the other side of the stone. We want to get that those bends, we want to get them up onto the stone better, and there's a trick to doing that. So we open those up just enough to be able to take the stone out, and we want to take this curve, and we're going to, right where it's curved here, we're going to kind of work it down. So we're just going to kind of push these on, and then you want to take the end of this long one and you want to kind of push it down. All I'm doing is I'm making, I'll show you the profile here in a second of this. We're just kind of bending this onto the stone. We want to exaggerate this so that it's pushed securely onto the stone. So I'm going to kind of bend this down. Okay, so notice I've got this pushed down further, and I want to do it evenly on both sides of this, but we want this snug. So now what I can do is I can take my stone, and see, notice it's kind of hard to put in, and that's good because it's going to push this snugly over the stone. So look, see, so now I've got this, and I've got my coverage where I want it, right here at the top of the stone. So take the stone out one more time, and what we want to do is we now want to clean up the wire. We want to take and shape these prongs, and we also want to remove these two marks at the top on the bail. And to do that, what we use is we use non-acetone fingernail polish remover. And we're going to put that on a cotton swab. So I'm just going to pour just a little bit of this, just a touch. We don't need a lot of this, but just enough to where we can get it onto the cotton swab. So I've got my cotton swab here, and I'm just going to kind of lap up a little bit of that, soak into there, and I'm just going to wipe those off. They should come right off. There we go. So that one's gone, and now let's remove this one. And if there's any other ones that you see that you don't like, that maybe are showing or will show in the final piece, you can remove those too. This one's being a little cantankerous. There we go. Alright, so that should remove those. So now we can concentrate on the next step, which is we're going to shape these prongs. So to shape these prongs, they're nice and squared now. What we want to do is we want to give them a curve. We want them to have a nice gentle curve so they lay on top of the stone really well. And there's two ways you can do it. We can use our Dremel tool and with the silicone rubber polishing wheel in it like we did for these on the back. We shaped those the same way. Or you can use a flat needle file to do that. You can take a flat needle file and you can use that to curve this, just slowly doing that. But I like doing it the fast way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to shape them. So let me shape these two prongs, and I'll show you what the final piece looks like. Alright, so I've just taken and just put a nice smooth curve on there. That's all I've done. And now it's ready to be reset. So I can take my stone and I can put my stone back in, line it up where I had it, and then I can take my WrapMaker pliers, and I'm going to put one jaw here at the bottom of the stone right here, and then I'm going to put the other tip right here at the tip of the prong, and I'm just going to push this prong up against here. And be careful not to do anything to the stone. You do not want to hurt your stone, so be careful when you're doing that. And we'll do the other one. Same thing, we're going to put this at the bottom of the prong, put the other end at the top, and just kind of push it over the stone. And there you have it. A nice finished piece. And I want you to know that this shape here, you can take your pliers and you can maneuver this and shape this any way you want. You can even do that before you make this, as you're making the whole piece, putting it all together. You can make the shape of this on the front and then go to the back and wrap it all together. So when we first made this, I first made this half moon shape here. I could have made any shape that I really wanted to, as long as you're covering the stone, the top of the stone and the bottom of the stone, because these are serving as prongs just as these are. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing with these, that you've got that coverage. You don't really need to have coverage over the whole stone, but you do want coverage at the top and the bottom here as prongs. See, isn't that a beautiful pendant? I just love how those swirls come across the front. And it's really versatile too. You know, I mentioned that there's lots of things that you can do with that shape on the front. You can make that look almost anything you want. You don't even have to have both those wires on that swirl. You can only use one large wire to come across the front of that. Very versatile, very beautiful pendant, and I'm sure your customers are going to love it. If you give your work away to your family and friends, they're really going to love it. Nice big pendant. It really makes a statement, doesn't it? All right. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you came by and took a look. Please do me a favor. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you ring the bell next to it so that you don't miss out on any of these project tutorials. And please give me a like too. You know, I like those thumbs up. So give me that like and come back for my next one. I put these out usually on Thursdays, so check back in again. All right? Again, my name is Jim McIntosh. And as always, please remember, practice, practice, practice.